It's Friday morning. I'm on my way to work. I'm going to turn this video around so that you can see something more interesting than me. It's a snowy day here. I'm just getting ready to leave Clover Valley. Turn on to Highway 93. And I wanted to talk a little bit about just what's been happening the last couple of days and in my own life over the last couple of weeks. I've really been struggling with depression the last couple of weeks, and I've chalked it up to several different things. The season, there's not as much sunlight. I'm kind of sensitive to that. I'm in between graduating from college and moving into my graduate studies, yet still in a holding pattern before I began my studies. Put that on. And things happening with the world and with family. And so I haven't felt quite like myself for some time. And then on Wednesday evening, I got a phone call from my son, who lives in Enoch, Utah, and he told me what had happened with the murder-suicide of the Haight family. I did not know them personally by name. I saw a photo of the family and recognized them from church events. They went to the same church building. They were in a different ward than we were. I'm a member of the LDS faith, and when there's a lot of us all in one, we go to church at different times just to accommodate the large number of people. So I recognized their family. And it was very heartbreaking. It was really hard. I'm going to apologize in advance. I may start bawling, and it's hard to understand me when I cry. And I thought I had it under pretty good control yesterday when I went to work. I thought I had gotten to an okay place. And I was okay the first couple of hours. And then I'd been working for a couple of hours in one of the younger classes at the elementary school, and I got to thinking about how I was in the same age group, the same class age group as the twins, the Haight family twins that were 7 that were killed. And it just made me so sad. It made me just heartbroken to think of those poor little children. And yesterday was a hard day. I just had to go home. I could not keep functioning, so I took a mental health day. And it was rough. On top of all the other things I'd been feeling, grief at the loss of a young friend who died in childbirth, just different issues. It kind of came crashing down on me yesterday, and I was really struggling emotionally with just the grief, just the awful grief of it all. And I went to bed early. Normally I struggle with sleeping, and so I don't go to bed sometimes till 10 or 11 at night, which probably isn't that late for some people, but I'm not usually a night owl, so that's late for me. But I went to bed and it was like 6:30 at night. I mean, it's dark because it's winter, so that helped, but I went to bed and I slept until almost 4 o'clock in the morning, and then at 4 I woke up. There was no more sleeping at that point. And I could hear William out in the living room. He was awake, and he just was coughing, and because he's had a cold the last little bit. So I went out and we visited, and we talked for a couple of hours, just visited about things. And in our conversation, we finally worked our way around to the atonement of Jesus Christ and the forgiveness and salvation he offers. people in all of their trials. A lot of people, I think sometimes my belief in an atonement is misunderstood. I think there's actually a lot of misunderstandings because there's so many different religions in the world, right? So many different ways of seeing God and finding a way to God. That sometimes it's easy to misunderstand someone's perception of and belief in deity. But I do believe in an atonement, and sometimes that view is seen as atonement is conflated with the same idea as absolution, as if an atonement is all about forgiving a person of mistakes that they've made and making the mistake okay. And I don't see it that way at all. That is not how I view the atonement at all. I view the atonement, that meeting place between God and man, where God in divine wholeness meets man in our partial development, in our lack of wholeness, but our craving for it. And God makes up the difference for our lack in that moment, in that atonement. Atonement, to me, is making someone whole again. And wanting to be whole is not dependent upon someone first being broken or brokenhearted or sinful or sinned against. Atonement, the willingness to accept the atonement on our part, has everything to do with simply having a desire to be whole, to be complete. And that is something that God offers to anyone. So here's where my thoughts went this morning in my early morning conversation with William. That Jesus, God, came to save all people who hurt. Both those who are wounded and those who do the wounding. So that everyone in that family, God intends to save, including the perpetrators of the horror. And sometimes that's a hard thing for people to accept, particularly, and I can say this as myself because I struggle sometimes with justice. I've told people in the past I have a very strong justice gene. I despise injustice. I despise people getting away with hurting others and just continuing to hurt others out of selfishness or wickedness and evil or whatever it is that makes them hurt other people all the time. It makes me so frustrated. I'm like, can't you just get your stuff together and stop hurting people? But they can't. Some people just can't, because whatever the reason is, they hurt so bad that they can't be alone in it, and they have to bring other people into that pain so that at least they don't have to deal with the pain of being alone in their pain. But I've gotten to a place in my life where I see forgiveness as greater than justice. Mercy is greater and more powerful. And it doesn't mean that justice does not still exist, because I believe that God is a just God. But I also believe that He is a merciful God. And I believe that mercy is more fully associated with wholeness and completeness, which is what the atonement is, than justice is. And I'll tell you where I came to that understanding. It was probably, I want to say it was September 13th, 2001. book, Walking My Father's Fields. This is going to be the abbreviated spoken version of it. But following the September 11th attacks that were just so distressing, I heard it on the radio. It's funny, it seems so foreign now because you see things before you hear them most of the time in our day and age with phones in everybody's hand, but at the time, you set aside time to watch the television. It just wasn't on all the time, and at that particular time, I was at my mother's house, just sitting at the table listening to my mom. We were talking, and my brother called and said, "You need to turn on the radio," and I turned it on, and of course the news of the World Trade Towers, the Twin Towers being hit, was on the radio, and we just listened in horror as the September 11th attacks unfolded live on radio. And it was just incredibly distressing. My husband finished up with work, we went home, we sat in front of the television and watched the towers fall. We watched the Pentagon burn. We saw the wreckage of the plane in Pennsylvania. We saw it was just horrible, and it was a horrible feeling. It was this huge empty pit that opened up in the pit of my stomach, and it was awful. And I kept watching the news because I think when something I've struggled with this emotion the last couple of days too. When something horrific happens, we struggle with our attempt to make sense of the horror. We struggle to try to make sense of something that is senseless. We try to bring some kind of clear thinking to a world that has suddenly become crazy. And so that's what I did. I just kept watching, hoping that maybe a different end to the story would come out of all of those news reports. And as each viewing of that event kept playing over and over again on the news, this feeling just blew up inside of me like a bomb going off in my heart and my mind. And it was horrible. It was cold. It was painful. And I realized I was filled with hate. I'd never really hated anybody before. I didn't hate anyone. I couldn't think of anybody that I hated at all. But I did in that moment. I hated the terrorists. I hated them. And it wasn't enough that they were dead. It was not enough that they were dead. They needed to be flung to the deepest pits of hell, where they could just rot in their nothingness. That's what I wanted for them, because it was not enough. Not enough that they were dead. Because the other people were dead, and they did nothing wrong. So death is not enough. Death is not a punishment bad enough for someone who is so cruel that they would look into the eyes of children and willfully murder them. I was a young mother. I had 2 children. I couldn't imagine anyone being that evil. And as I sat on the couch watching the news again, my 2 oldest boys were very young at the time. They were just playing, had their toys, and they were playing. And I didn't realize at the time that I had been crying until Ezekiel, he was my oldest, he comes up and he puts his hands on my face. He says, "Mommy, why are you crying?" And I hadn't even realized I was crying. That feeling was so awful, that hate. And I just said, I'm sad. He said, why are you sad? And I said, because there were some very bad men who did something very bad and they hurt a lot of people. And it makes me sad. And he just came up and snuggled me. And I thought of that love that my little boy had, and his little brother who came over and curled up on me at the same time, and we all sat there snuggling. I thought of that love between brothers. I thought of that, the easy affection between them. I thought, I can't live with this level of hate in my heart. I cannot live with it. And so I got down on my knees right there in my living room and knelt there by my couch, and I just prayed. And I asked my Heavenly Father to just help me to take that feeling of hatred away, because I couldn't live with it anymore. I couldn't live with that hatred anymore. And the most amazing thing happened to me. This feeling, this terrible, beautiful feeling filled my heart. And I recognized it because it was this huge, tremendous echo of something I already felt in my heart, which is a parent's love for their children. And for just the barest moment, I felt God's love as this divine parent for the children. And I heard a voice in my head say, all of the people on those planes were my children. Which ones would you have me deny? And I had this moment of terrible clarity. How would it be to be the parent of all the world's people who like to choose reasons to hate each other and to hurt each other? How would it be to be the parent who wants to heal and make whole all of their children, even the ones who make terrible, tragic decisions? And I thought, hon, don't deny any of them, because we all need redemption. And I thought of that story this morning as I was talking to my husband. I was thinking it would be so easy to be angry. Anger is so easy. To be angry at a father who could murder his children. Or I can remember that everyone in that house was a child of God. A God who wants to heal them, all of them. I believe in eternal life, so it's easy for me to think of a larger time scale than just what life and death in this mortal realm provides. And so I believe I believe in a merciful God who will heal that whole family. And on their journey now, wherever it takes them, God will very lovingly and very compassionately heal them. And I'll continue to ask for a little bit of that healing for myself. Because this is hard. And I'll ask for it for my friends and for my neighbors down in Enoch, Utah. And in Laverton, Utah, where Gail was from. That they will be healed as well. And that they will have that peace that the atonement offers. Because the atonement isn't just for people who make horrible, tragic mistakes. It's also for all the hearts that are impacted by those tragedies. And I think we need more of that in the world. Anger's easy. But healing, mercy, forgiveness are more valuable, and they're worth the effort. I hope today's a little bit better day. Yesterday was hard. Sometimes it's hard. It's hard to function in the work that we have before us sometimes when there are big things that happen in our hearts that are not visible in our bodies. And it's important to remember that you have to take time to let those things heal. You have to take time. The work still needs to happen. It's true. But healing takes time. I hope healing for you today. Have a good day.